Thank you, everybody, for coming. I think Meredith said we're going to give it about 2 more minutes to see if we have any late arrivals, and then we'll get the show on the road, because I think we've got another class or meeting bookending us on the backside, and I want to make sure we have plenty of time for conversation after a very short presentation.
Ready to go whenever you are.
Okay, we're good. I don't know, did you need to say anything, or we're just rock and roll?
This is an exploration of what the interest might be for an OLLI travel program. So Josh has worked with other programs, other OLLIs, and you will talk about that as part of your presentation.
Absolutely.
We're here to see what you have to offer and see if we're interested in what he's offering. So,
Awesome.
yeah, thanks, Joe.
Well, thanks everybody for coming. As Meredith said, my name is Josh Karachi. I work on the partnerships team at Go Ahead Tours. So I'll talk a little bit in our presentation, just like who is Go Ahead, who is EF, how does this all work? But more specifically, I think for members to understand, my team specifically caters to the OLLI community. So the business I'm doing is going to be specifically with members. I was actually just, I got a slide coming up here. I was in Michigan just about 2 weeks ago for a travel week for one of our more established programs at Saginaw Valley State, where they launched 4 tours and had a whole week dedicated to member travel. And just hopefully we get some excitement here. Because selfishly, I live down in Denver, so I love an excuse to actually come up and interact with folks, where the majority of the work I'm doing is with schools that are all over the country, so I don't often get to come have these be in person. So again, appreciate everybody for coming out. Oh, I forgot, I need to be centered to this for the camera. So again, quick breakdown. We're going to talk about EF, our parent company, Go Ahead Tours, which is the specific division that does work with OLLIs and focuses on 50 and over travel. And of course, examples of work that I do in the OLLI space. So I know some have, because I have already had a couple conversations out front, but quick raise of hands if you've ever heard of EF as a company, Education First. Awesome. And if you're ever down in Denver and you're on 15th and Platte, right by the Wilderness Exchange and the REI, you'll see a big EF plastered on the building. That's our new office. That's where I work when I'm not here on campus talking to folks directly. But EF it stands for Education First. I think the thing to understand about EF is we are not a travel agency. We are an educational travel company, which is another reason I think we pair so well with the OLLI community. But actually, we didn't even start off in travel. Our founder over 55 years ago was from Sweden, and he wanted to learn English. So what he did is he founded a language learning school, and we have hundreds of them across the globe now, which bonus fact about that, when our travelers are going places, it's nice to know that, again, you never want this to be the case, but in case of emergency, we have staff on 6 continents, where if you actually need to send a real person, it's not just somebody calling back to the States saying, can you help us, please? But in addition to the travel component, I mentioned we have language learning, cultural exchange. That's where we help students come and live with families in the United States. And again, academic study abroad, so kind of the reverse of that. But thinking more specifically about EF, mentioned before, EF is the parent company. Underneath EF sits Go Ahead Tours. That is our 50 and up specific adult travel department. guided tours, I think before I even worked here, I would think of, I had family members who would do AAA tours or things like that. I would say we borrow some of those ideas, but it's an elevated experience. The joke I always make is, my grandparents did them. It's like they went to some place like Rome and you saw the picture on the old disposable camera, but you saw the reflection of the tour bus window in the background. That's not what's happening here. Like if you're going to go to Rome, you're going to go into the Colosseum. You're not going to see it from the bus. But yeah, I think it's good to just understand, go ahead. They've had 55 years of experience. The reason we have a picture of this gentleman here kneeling down with the grapes is and we'll talk about this during the Q&A session, all of the little nuance that make group travel great. But if I had to make a list and put the number one thing that's going to make the trip memorable and the best experience, it's the tour directors. Go Ahead spends a premium to make sure they have the best tour directors in the industry. And these are the folks that are with you from the time you get off the plane until the time you get back to the airport to do your own or to go back home. And of course, I'll be honest, I didn't do a ton of world traveling until I was in my 30s. And part of the reason I probably wasn't super motivated was I was a little nervous about going places where English wasn't the primary language. The nice thing about our tour directors is whether you're going to one country or multiple countries, they are going to be fluent in every language that you are going to be encountering. And it's nothing to be intimidated by, but I just like knowing that there's somebody there. If I have a question or need a sign translated or something, it's really nice to know that there are folks who are going to be able to help with that with me the whole time I'm on tour. Now, specifically thinking about the way that Go Ahead works with the OLLI community. So we have partnerships with more than the schools you see right here, but I just kind of put some of our bigger ones up on the list. So keeping it close to home, some of you might have seen the publication because I think members were offered the chance to join DU's trip to Japan, which is actually traveling next month to the Cherry Blossom trip. But in addition to DU, we work with Kentucky, Hampton in Virginia, Clemson, Pitt, Saginaw Valley State. We'll talk about that one in a second. That's where I was just visiting. Kentucky, Arizona State, Delaware, and Georgia. So these are pictures sitting in a similar room to this. I was back in Saginaw Valley. So I am from Michigan. I'll do the classic. It's right about here. So it's mid-Michigan. The wonderful lady there in the pink, that is their director, Shelley Wagner. She is an absolute amazing human being. She has done more things than I don't have time to tell you all the things she does for her members, but one of the things that I am clearly very grateful for what she does is she spends a tremendous amount of time prioritizing and engaging with members regarding their travel program. So the reason I went was because I mentioned before they had an entire travel week. So a schedule Monday through Friday. Some of it was based on tours. Some of it was based on, bringing in other experts that can talk about the regions the tours are going to, people that just, they're in mid-Michigan, so they're not super close to places to like redo passports. So they brought in people so people could re-up their passports. A lot of amazing things just to help her members be ready to travel. But the thing that I was excited about was the fact that we launched trips to Spain and Portugal, the Canadian Maritimes, a second Food and Wine. It's 2.0 because they did a different version of Italy the year before. So this was kind of like the extension, the next chapter, and also an Iceland tour. We launched those on a Tuesday. Registration was the following Tuesday. All 4 tours sold out within 48 hours. So again, not something I would expect to do if it's your first time getting into the travel industry or the travel like program with the OLLI. But I think it is nice to know that these are programs that when you go on a trip, you're excited to go back the next year because it's just another way to engage with members and the community. Specifically thinking about tours that are closer to us, I mentioned before, DU launched their tour to Japan a little under a year ago. Not a little schedule-wise, a little quicker than average. Traditionally, we like to launch our tours about a year in advance just to give people time to plan and budget and do all the things to make sure they can join. But just some things to know about the tour that DU is going on, and this is actually their first tour this year. It is a custom tour, which means it's not one of the tours you can find on our website. We built it specifically for them because of some requests they had. But thinking on average, it's a 13-day tour, but that's why you see 11 days. Whenever you look at tours, I think something to think about is always subtract 2 from the number of from the total of days, because day one is your travel there day, and the last day is your travel home day. And this is because I have not been to Japan, so I can't speak to a lot of the specific places they're going, but I do know, according to my wife, it's number 1 or 2 on our bucket list. And then I reached out because I've been talking with Meredith for a while, and just I did a little homework on specific courses that are being offered here. And these are not tours that we've picked out yet. Part of today, of course, is to get engagement. Your opinions are what matters the most about picking out potential places. But I thought it would be good just to kind of see those 4 are courses that are going to be offered here, I think this term. And I just kind of went and did some independent research. And this is another thing that we do as the OLLI's partner, is we want to make sure we're not just picking any tour and saying, hey, go to Ireland, go to England. Okay, well, let's do a little more work than that. Like, let's make sure it's tying into something that we might already be doing, or things that people are already going to be excited about. So just as an example, for the tour, a wine tour of Italy, we actually have 4 different food and wine tours that go to Italy. But specifically, if you look here, one of the options, and you look at this tour that starts in Rome, but it's not a tour that's just going to stay in a big city. If you're going to Italy and you want to learn about winemaking, yeah, they've imported a lot of their great wine to the big cities, but that's not where the actual wine is being made. You want to go and be able to go to the smaller towns and go in the countryside and stay in an agriturismo and actually be able to meet with the winemakers. These are the type of experiences like we're talking about that these tours offer. In addition to it, thinking about a Greek tour, a lot of people here Greeks, they want to go to the islands, but if you're studying, Greek history, you're going to spend a little more time on the mainland. So we don't just do island hopping tours, and don't get me wrong, those are great. But at the end of the day, having a specific tour that goes to the places that ties into Greek history is going to be important. I think we already had one person say something about some interest in France potentially. Maybe not for the tour we were talking about, but if you look here, we have another food and wine tour that specifically goes to the wine growing regions in France. And then for a more, I'll call it introductory experience, I actually did my last go-ahead tour and I went to Ireland. So you can see here, we offer tours that go to Ireland that go Dublin all the way to County Cork in the south, up to Galway, stopping at the Cliffs of Moher. And then a lot of our tours offer extensions. And that's where you see this little dotted line here, where it gives you the ability to go to Northern Ireland as well. I mean, I think I'm part Irish. I think understanding clearly the history of Ireland, the ability to go to both Northern and Southern Ireland is very, very powerful if you are doing it from a historical perspective. But the thing to understand about extensions is that it does not group required. So it means everything you see in the black, that is what the group will be doing, the base tour. And we all have different schedules. If you have the ability to add some additional time on, most of our tours do give you the ability to add an additional stop if you want to, but it's nice to know that if your schedule doesn't allow it, doesn't mean you can't join a tour like that. But that is a quick run through of some ideas, a little bit of background about us. But as I mentioned before, the purpose of today's meeting wasn't just to get a background of who's EF, who's Josh, where are these places. It's to get questions from you all, because I came here because I want to hear what questions you have, and there is no bad question. And I'm really going to kind of open up the floor. Raise hands. I used to be a teacher, so I'm semi good at this, but please, feel free. First hand I saw in the back. So the benefits sure, no problem. Yep. So the question that was asked was, are there cost benefits from forming a group versus going independently? Is that more or less? Okay. I would say there's not necessarily cost benefits, because traditionally the way to join go-ahead tours is you can join what's called a consolidated tour, which means you are joining but you have no control over the folks you're joining with. You're just joining a public group. That's one way. Traditionally, OLLIs, what they do is they take what is either an existing tour and then they offer it privately, which means without strangers, because really the idea is bringing the OLLI community together. And as a result, it really is more of a wash what it comes out to. But so not really any direct cost savings. Really, the more motivator is traveling with other OLLI members. Like I said, maybe having something tied back to curriculum you're taking. That's really more the angle. Great question. The question was, do you have to pay a supplement for single rooms? And traditionally, our rooming is based off of double occupancy. So meaning, whether it's two, like a couple could share a room, or if it's friends, just two twin beds, things like that. If you have a desire to go independently and not have a roommate, yes, usually there is a small supplement to offset the single room cost. Good question. The question was, how many people traditionally travel? And the real answer is it varies, because even like if I go back here to these tours, the Ireland tour is more of it's a larger tour. It has a bigger capacity. So a tour like that might have the ability to travel 30, 35 people. Whereas our food and wine tours, because it's a more intimate experience, we cap those at 22. So you'll know when we launch a tour how many spaces are available when we launch it, but there isn't a set amount per tour. It really depends on which. The only thing I would say is if the group does choose to go the route of just a CSU specific tour, the minimum is 14. So it's always minimum 14 to travel, and then depending on what the maximum is, that's how that would work. Yeah. Well, again. I'll have to do it next.
That was with students. I'm looking forward to travel with Go Ahead, adults, students. But I'm wondering, a lot of the catalogs I've seen recently, you have to arrange your own transportation to get to the destination. Will these be tours like we all would meet at the Denver airport, travel together, be met in our destination country by a Go Ahead representative who would arrange for us to get to the hotels and everywhere?
Great question. So the question was about how does it work in terms of the group being together? And I would say the way you can expect it to be is, well, let me back up a second. We give people options. One, I think you made a good point because you mentioned you travel with students before. So with students, there's no option. You of course have to travel as a group. It's a safety component. There's adults, chaperones, all of that. So with Go Ahead, it's not that we don't offer it. It's actually standard to still be able to travel together. But what we don't require that you do flights with us. We give you the ability we can absolutely do it for you. But point being is, if you do flights with us and you're flying out of the same airport, as long as you do not add on in the last 60 days before we depart, the expectation is the group will travel together. So the only thing you're responsible for doing is getting yourself down to DIA. Once you're at DIA, the expectation is you'll be on the same flight. And then same thing on the backside. Another question was, how does it work once you get there? And same thing, if you are traveling with us, part of that flights package is not just your flights. It is the tour director picking you up from the airport and of course bringing you to your hotel. The only time you would be tasked to independently get yourself to anyone is if you do what's called a stay ahead or a stay behind, which means you arrive on a different day than the group is arriving, because then logistics gets messy. Even if you do your own flight and you don't travel with us, if you're arriving on the same day the rest of the group is arriving, for additional $25, you can get added to the shuttle service and just join them at the airport. So I do not want you worried that you're going to be in a new country figuring out the Uber system there and trying to figure out how that all works. No, you are good. Do you have a question? Sorry, you had a hand, then I'll come to you. Oh, sorry, no, it's okay. No, we're not going to do it twice. Go ahead, you're up, Keith.
Talk about the mixture of education and group time versus individual time. I know it probably varies from tour to tour, but it's kind of in general what the mix is.
No, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. So Keith asked, what is the balance or the mixture of like time, your education time versus group time, maybe even versus independent time? So I'm going to reference again student tours a little bit, because when I worked with students, clearly the goal of those tours is you want every minute of your day blocked up, because you don't want 20 high school students in the middle of Paris with nothing to do. It's going to become a mess quickly. We are adults for the most part. I think that I always used to joke with teachers. I was like, well, adults are just kids that got older. But point being is, adults like a little bit more balance, a little more freedom. They don't want to necessarily have every second of their day blocked. So you are correct. It's going to vary a little bit per tour, but I think a pretty standard expectation to have for balance is at the most on any normal like base tour day, you're going to have half a day of guided sightseeing. So that's, you're with your tour director, you're taken to places. Also, one other thing to understand is when the package, like the places it'll say that's included, like if you look back on this slide, and these are the highlights, all these places you're going, that is going to be organized for you. So you never need to buy a ticket to these places. You are there, your tour director is handling all those logistics, getting you there, handling your entrance, all of that. But point being, it's about half the day on an average day. What some of our tours offer are optional excursions. So I always say everybody's different. There are some people, child or not, want to have every second of their day planned for them. So on those days where the whole group is doing half a day, some of those days will offer like a second half. You can add on to have a full day, maybe do a day trip, do something specific. But if you opt not to do that, what you're doing is that remaining day is more free time. So, and your tour director is still a great reference. Our hotels are prioritized to be in centrally located places. So if you have free time, you're not walking out in the middle of a cornfield being like, well, where the heck am I going to go? You are going to have a lot of assistance to do whatever you want to do during that free time. But in terms of normal balance, never really more than half the day. All right, and come back to you.
So if hypothetically, if the minimum number is 14
Mhm.
and there are not 14 people from the CSU OLLI program, would you have the ability to ask the DU OLLI program if they could fill those empty slots, or would it be specifically only for CSU OLLI?
Good question. So I might have you ask it again. So you said in the event, because we said there's a minimum of 14 play, would you be able to offer those additional spots to different OLLI members outside of CSU? So yes, great question. So the answer is yes. So at the end of the day, each OLLI basically picks how specific with how exclusive the groups are going to be. What I mean by that, even some of them only offer spots to members. Some of them offer to spots to members and family. Some of them, because like the program I was at up at Saginaw Valley, when we pitched the trips, we gave multiple pricing, and one of the pricing is for members and one of the pricing is for non-members. This is actually a good way to get some additional dues, because what people are like, well, if I pay my dues when I go, then I get a cheaper price. So there's some benefits there. Point being is, I don't see, and actually the two schools are already in partnership. So if you had a friend at DU's OLLI that you wanted to travel with, I do not think you're going to have to worry about excluding them. So the question was, do you have an age minimum? So this is a little bit similar related to that, where normal standard go-ahead trips, the minimum is as low as 6. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about OLLI specific tours, sometimes the OLLI, if they just want members going, of course, that age minimum goes up. But traditionally, there is not a hard minimum. Like, people have children that they want to invite, like their 20, 30-year-old children. As long I say we check with the folks that are running it at the OLLI, but in the past, that hasn't been an issue. In the back. Great question. The question was variety of destinations, because we only kind of saw things that are in Asia and Europe so far. So we travel as of right now to 6 continents. So we do trips to Africa, we do trips to Latin America. We actually have one of the larger offices in Panama. And then we have trips to South America. We used to have 7. There was a time pre-COVID where we did an annual trip for our very VIP group coordinators to Antarctica. I'm excited for them to bring that back, but technically right now it doesn't exist, so we can only claim 6. But absolutely, we go to all those places. What was the second part? So the question was, do we do specifically I guess can I call it like theme trips, like on music? And then, so the answer is yes, we have. We actually have had internal discussions about one of our account managers, his mother is like very tightly associated with the orchestra where she lives in southern Indiana. So talking about branching into things like specific trips for like orchestras and things like that. Those tend to be, I would say I mentioned before, like the Japan trip is a custom trip. So it takes a little more work to do those type of trips. But at the end of the day, it is possible. The way our trips work, if you do a custom trip, is basically I would work with the coordinator to figure out what the parameters we'd want from the trip. We have a whole internal team that builds those custom trips. And what they do is they have to go source to make sure those unique things are something, because of course we'll never sell something we can't produce. So I always say those are, we can ask for the world and we'll see what we can get.
So you just do fly and drive, or is there components that are like river, or a cruise type of a component, even if it's only for a day or from a destination to destination?
Great question. So the question was, is it just fly and then drive, or there's any sort of water components like cruises and things like that? Primarily, it's just you go over, you fly over, and then like you have a private like luxury tour bus that takes you around. There are a few exceptions. We have one that goes from Greece to Italy that does have a cruise component. And in addition, I actually have a colleague that's on one of our more popular destinations the last couple of years has been going to Egypt. And well, all of our Egypt trips, you start in Cairo and then you actually fly down, and then there is a component on more of like the river cruise as you go up toward Luxor. So not a punch, like we don't venture into the like German river cruises and things like that, but there are a couple of our tours that have water components to them.
I'm interested in the cultural standpoint, so how deep do you get into that? Would you like maybe go to some local people's home for a dinner, or go to a folk dancing group that you get to participate in and that kind of thing?
It's a great question. So Mary asked how in depth is the cultural immersion on these tours? And it's a big priority. So things you had mentioned, like many of our tours offer home hosted dinners. So things to also expect about that. If we have a big group, of course, one family is not going to be able to bring 25, 30 people into their home. So we have multiple families that we work with to allow, because that would be one of those I mentioned, like the excursions that happen. So it is something where you can add it on because some people want to do it and some people might not be as interested. But I think what you're mentioning, whether like if it's like we do one in Spain where we focus on like flamenco dancing, but like not only do we have like, is there a presentation of it? Like we go up and it's actually I'm not sure even how they found this vendor, but it's done in a cave. And then like so I think those for you to know, I kind of go back to the example about you're not taking a picture from a bus while you're going by saying like, oh yes, I went to this place. We do everything in our power to make the experience of it as immersive as possible. So I think hopefully that makes sense. I saw a hand over here. Oh.
Yeah. Would there be any add-on possibilities for biking?
So the question was, are there add-on possibilities for biking? What I say for that is very much an activity that would fall under the I guess like the range of free time activities. Like if we go to, Amsterdam or some of the places like that where clearly biking is life. We would never, I'll just be very transparent, it's a liability issue. So we don't carry policies that would have like everybody gets on a bike, because if we do anything, it has to be, there are very specific legalities about it can't be on a road. And basically when you whittle it down, it would be like you in a park going in a circle, which is not very fun. But it doesn't mean you can't on your free time, like we have no control, like have the vendor. And that's honestly one of the things a lot of times I host what are called like pre-departure meetings or like in-between meetings. So let's just say, let's imagine we're here and we're going on this trip and like we're launching, everybody's excited, they sign up. So once we have the group together, it doesn't stop. I mean, I don't think good programs don't stop engagement with members after they know you're signed up and it's like, okay, we'll see you next year in Japan. No, it's about honestly the time in between when you sign up and when you depart is some of the most important time, because I think what a lot of people do is they get together, And one, they decide on if we're offering excursions, well, which ones maybe do we all want to do together? Secondly, okay, on day 4 and day 7 and day 9, there's a decent chunk of free time. Let's get together. Let's use the power of, you know, a group to divide and conquer, and like, let's do our own Googling on the backside. Like, let's look at different travel websites and like, let's pick out some options that maybe we would want to participate when we're not on tour. So I definitely think that's something like that. I would encourage, like I said, we'll go and we'll talk about that as a group. And, because I do think, you know, sometimes it's a little overwhelming to be like, oh, you have a whole free day. Like, what in the heck am I going to do? I've never been there before. So yeah. Smart man.
Exactly. US trips, what have you done? What's popular?
Oh, great question. And I'm sorry, I realized you asked in the back about the domestic part. I apologize for missing that. We have domestic offerings, not as vast as we have internationally, but things like we've got trips that go to Alaska. I mean, we are all probably a little more used to it here, but East Coasters like to come out here and go to Utah and Zion and go up toward Glacier and do like a Western swing. We've got one that goes to Charleston for South Carolina. We've got a DC trip. So I would say it's definitely not we are much more focused on the international part, but we do have domestic offerings. Oh, we also do one to Hawaii.
What about handicap accessibility and accommodation?
Good question. So the question was, what about handicap accessibility? So the good thing about the way this works is whether it's handicap accessibility, things like food and dietary restrictions, things that are unique to a specific traveler, we have a dedicated account manager. So like you have a file on, like you have an account. So what we would do if you had concerns like that is I recommend before enrolling actually calling in, because every tour is different. There are certain places that if you have a strong enough, I mean, I think about this from the mindset, I used to be a special ed teacher. So accommodations, I tell folks here, especially if you've never traveled abroad, even just thinking from a mobility perspective, like you can be decently mobile, but like we are fortunate because most things here, I mean, I guess we're in Colorado, so there's like the mountain component, but like things are flat when you're walking. If you're in Europe and the street that you're walking on was built in the 1800s or 1600s and it's cobblestone, no matter amount of money you're going to spend is going to make that street flat because it's going to be bumpy. So I would say it's going to depend on the tour, and we would want to probably consult with you to understand the specific traveler, because we wouldn't ever want to recommend someone to have an experience that isn't going to be fun for them or beneficial. Good. Doris. Sorry, can you say that again? Oh, so the website is goaheadtours.com. And just so folks know, we will be sending out some digital materials. We are also doing our part to reduce our carbon footprint. So I did not want to come here with a bunch of handouts. But at the end of the day, we will be making sure folks have materials after this meeting that they can reference as well. In the back. Good question. So the question is, can you get a relative guesstimate on price, and can you talk about hotels? So I'm going to reverse the answers. I'm talking about hotels first. Minimum 4-star. So people go to Europe, people are thinking, hey, are we going to go to a hostel? Absolutely not. We are not going to have group showers and jamming people into bunk beds and things like that. No, that is not what we're talking about. And that's across the board. It isn't like, oh, if you go to this country, it's this. That is a go-ahead standard. But in terms of price, I mean, I would say this, I can give you a wide range. And the reason I have to give you a wide range is, of course, like the difference. You know, when I reference here, if you are doing Ireland, the traditions of the Emerald Isle, which is still it's an 11-day tour. Without flights, you're talking about a tour that's going to be, you know, in between 3,000 and 4,000. And of course, adding flights and additional things brings that price up. But if you're going to be doing a specific food and wine tour that's longer, or like that, I mean, talking about the DU one, that one was in excess of $7,000 because it was custom. It was almost 2 weeks long. It was going to a different destination. So I'm careful when I throw out numbers because I never want to under promise or over promise. It just is really going to be specific on what tours we pick, which is also why you see a lot of OLLIs, well, for a number of reasons, offer couple tours, because part of that is, one, we want to make sure people have different interests and they're engaged and they're going to be excited about where they're going. let's just be honest, like other things are, everybody's in different position. Like I think you want to have one for me, and probably bigger picture of my days as a special ed teacher, like accessibility and availability is paramount to me. Like I would not in good conscience come out and say, hey, let's pick a $10,000 tour that leaves in 3 months. Because the majority of people are going to be like, wow, that sounds fun. Send me the pictures. Let me know how it is when you get back. We want to make sure we're giving people the time. Like I said, mentioned before, usually we roll these tours out about a year in advance. Like the tours that I rolled out in Saginaw, the closest one is 10 months away and everything else is over a year and a half. Very much is designed because when you enroll on our tours, you put a small amount down as a deposit, and then the rest of the time you can either choose how you pay it down or you can just get into a split it up equally monthly. And that I think makes, I know from an accessibility standpoint, a lot more folks are able to do it because you can look at it. I'm married to an accountant, so I have to think in the way of like budgeting and like how to spread the money out. So I think it's important to know that as well. Mhm. Sure. So the question was, what advice do you have for independent travelers that this might be their first time doing group travel? I think understanding the differences is good. I mean, when you are with a group, I wouldn't say it dramatically changes the experience. You should still be able to go all the same places you want to go. I think it's more just thinking about the scheduling of the day. There's a structured nature to group travel, which I think, some independent travelers, like they might not like that at all. That's definitely worth considering. Where you are, like I said before, the pace, you're not going to be gone all day, but I think knowing that you'll have a breakfast in the morning, your tour director the night before will have told you you'll know the plan for the day. I mean, you also know when you sign up a year in advance, you have the itinerary. It doesn't change. But in terms of things to know for independent travelers, I just think there's some level of, this is a block of time that the group has at the Louvre. So it's not like, hey, after 20 minutes, if I want to change my mind, it's not as easy to be like, well, I'm going to go. I mean, you can go head out and do something else, but I think it's more just the courtesy to the overall group if there's certain schedules to keep to kind of make sure you're aware of them. But besides that, I wouldn't say the overall experience. I mean, I've done a lot of like couple travel versus traveling with work. I don't think there's a ton of major differences. Mhm.
Is there insurance? Because with this age group, I can't say for sure.
That's a great point. So the question was, I referenced being able to pay over time, but the question I think is more of, do we offer an insurance? And the answer is yes. We do not build it in. It's like everything else. My tagline for Go Ahead is pick your own adventure. One of those things is, do you add the insurance or not? We of course recommend it. We offer 2 different ones. But in addition to it, because it's not mandated, some folks that do a lot of traveling might already carry an existing policy. So that's why we can't force you to use ours. So you can we give you 2 options, but if you want to do some shopping outside, that's perfectly okay as well. But yes, we definitely have coverage for folks to make sure, because at the end of the day, you never know. Like the life comes at us quick. I was saying to somebody else, you can't really tell through under the shirt, but I went skiing on Christmas Eve, and there's a reason it looks like I have a mannequin arm, because we're getting the flexion back every week at PT. So I know what you mean.
Also, I guess considering the age of this group, if you're gonna be going out and doing tours and everything, about what time would you start in the morning?
Great question. So the question was, what time are we starting? And I have to ask a follow-up question. Are you saying like, do we start really, really early? Because I joke like, oh no, there will be no 6 a.m. wake up calls. I think, your question about thinking about difference traveling with a group versus traveling independently. When you travel with a group, I think there has to always be some level of like creating averages, because no way, even if, yeah, everybody might be from an OLLI, but like that doesn't mean everyone doesn't have different sleep schedule, different things. So no, I mean, traditionally on the tours I've been in, people are eating breakfast closer to 8, like 7:30, 8 at the earliest. And again, there's buffer time to go. You got to run up to your room, do stuff. Traditionally, the bus is picking you up from the hotel to start, if we're doing touring that morning, 9 o'clock. It is not, sometimes even a little later, depending on the schedule of the day. But I can assure everyone in the room, there will be no 6 a.m. wake-up calls. We're not doing that. No, thanks. Great question. So do you have an estimate before you enroll about basically how much time you're on buses and how much time you're walking around? All tours have an average time basically on your feet. And also in addition to that, they have, because you might have 3 hours on your feet in Greece, it's going to look different 3 hours on your feet in Machu Picchu. So there's also activity levels so people understand like what to expect on the tour. And in terms of the bus, it's different. There isn't really an average, but what we don't do is we're never on a bus for like in total for more than 4 hours a day. So it's one of the ones, but I'm saying that's not a normal thing. That's like having a hard cap. Traditionally, I mean, things like also looking at, keep referencing back, these are smaller maps, but this one, I mean, this trip is actually more transportation is done via train than it is anything else. But when you're on buses, like I said, I'll just give an example. When I was in Ireland last April, get up, eat breakfast, go out, have sightseeing tours that are, they're in the city primarily where you're staying. So again, you're not traditionally having long drives back and forth to where you're visiting. That's really more if you're doing like on the trip to Spain, one of the days, it gives you the ability to do a half day to Toledo. So if you're doing that, that is more like an hour each way, but that's also an optional excursion, which means that if you opt not to do it, you're not on the bus at all that day. So that's what makes it a little harder to find an average, but I can want everyone here to not be worried that, again, I signed up for this tour, I'm spending thousands of dollars and I'm just sitting on a bus all day. That is very much not the experience we are trying to provide.
So to piggyback on that, are you staying, most of the tours have a base hotel and you're using that base and going out and doing your excursions every day? Or are you moving from city to city, I guess, depending upon the tour? And if that's the case, luggage transportation, getting it on the bus, who takes care of all that? Are we bringing it down from our hotel every morning, standing there waiting to put it on underneath the bus, getting it off the bus? How is that all kind of set up? Is it camping or is it glamping?
Good question. So the question was regarding how do what's the basic layout of hotels? And then also in addition to that, what's the expectation regarding like with luggage? Is this something we're going to have to be hauling around all the time? Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. So first part is clearly it's tour specific for hotels. I don't really recommend doing tours that have more than 3 hotels just because of what you're describing. At the end of the day, every additional hotel does have some component of needing to check out of a hotel, come down, retransport your luggage. But in terms of a daily piece, when you are in a hotel, of course, there's no expectation to have to bring your luggage down back to the bus. It would only be on transportation days if you are changing locations. But again, we offer some tours. My first tour I ever did was a city stay in Paris. So I never had to change my hotel once. So my luggage came in, they stayed for the week or 9 days, and then I brought it to the bus and went to the airport. In terms of handling the luggage, I would say it's a medium expectation for what you have to do. Majority of hotels that we work with, again, we also understand like age group, like that Ireland tour, there was the expectation usually you had to roll your luggage from the bus, which is parked in like usually one of the little roundabouts, into the hotel lobby, where traditionally hotels has staff that will help bring it up to the room. Specifically if there's, smaller hotels in Europe that have stairs versus elevators, where the majority of ours are going to have elevators. Every once in a while there's one with stairs. And if there's stairs, you can feel good that there will be staff to help bring luggage up. Good? Excellent. Question was, do you have the ability to opt out of any day's tours? Of course, yes, you can. I would say if the follow-up question to that is, do I opt out in advance and then like have my bill adjusted? And the answer is no to that, because it's one of the ones where you are signing up for the base tour. So you are you are getting whatever is on the base tour. But of course, there are certain folks that have, you know, I have found it more often if you're visiting a country or maybe you have like family or lineage or something specifically that's not on tour and you want to go do more independent travel that day, there's no one that says, hey, no, you have to, there's no security guard that keeps you with the group. But it kind of goes back to your original question about like, well, what is the difference here? It's just understanding like, you know, if there's a dinner that night, like when to be back by, but there's nothing that stops you from opting out of a day. The only thing I guess that would potentially cause a issue with that is, of course, wouldn't recommend opting out of a day that's a travel day, because like, God forbid you have something that like gets you stuck someplace and then you can't get back in time, and now the group has literally gone to a different city. But I think we're all common sense people here. I don't think people to do that. Yes.
Is it hotel driven? Is it big group driven? You know, are we doing breakfast at the hotel, lunch at the hotel, or is there a mix and a cultural mix of where we are and what we can?
Great question. So it's about food and understanding. Is it just like you're always eating at a hotel? Is it mixed? Like what are the culinary options going to be? And I would say it's very much mixed. I would say the expectation for breakfast is breakfast will be at hotels. And again, we're mentioning these are 4-star hotels. You're going to Europe. I love European breakfast. There's like 4 different croissants, meats and cheeses, all the things that would be nice to have at an American breakfast, but are not always there. But then in terms of other meals, it's very much tour specific. Dinners are almost never in a hotel. We find vendors and like restaurants we work with that can accommodate the size of the group. I think it's kind of like you travel to this country, like you want to be able to experience local food. I think the other part to understand about meals, back to the pick your own adventure concept, you will, unless we did a custom tour where it was requested by the group, you are never going to have a tour where every dinner is included. And the reason we do that is kind of for the same idea. If you have a group of 30 and and again, we've been on student tours before, you are still, I'll be very honest, like you're getting the local food, but because you're having to produce it on mass scale, takes a little bit away from the experience. And I'm 38 and the only reason I travel anymore is to go to places where I want to eat. So I would say remembering, and I'm getting excited about the fact that like, when you look at the schedule and thinking like, here are the days we're going to be in cities that probably have amazing food, but it isn't a day where meals are included. I mean, that's where you can have some fun, because that's when you can look up and, you know, I know folks that make reservations 8 months in advance because they really want to go to a certain restaurant or things like that. So that help? Excellent. Yes. Sure. So the question was expanding a little bit more on the educational component of the tours. So I mentioned before, of course, your tour director is going to be with you the whole time. They have, I would say, some very specific knowledge that they can share, but like they're going to be an expert on every place we're going on the tour. In addition to the tour director, we also supplement local guides. So when you're going to maybe a specific city or a specific, you know, I use the food and wine ones a lot, but like you're going to an olive oil farm and like you are having a conversation with a member of the family who like that's been in their family for 7 generations. Like it's very important to bring in I think really ground level experts on the places you're going. And also, I just think it's back to how the tours are curated. Remembering before, like if they have themes, of course, you're going to see those themes be very prevalent in how we have the tour picked out. But at the end of the day, even if it's more of a general tour, like when I did my tour to Ireland, it's like we went to immigration museums to see about like what it was like, you know, during the potato famine, like the exodus of Ireland to the United States and other places like that. Like you're doing historical things, like you're visiting the oldest cathedral in Dublin, you're doing the Cliffs of Moher. So it's like, I think it's a good balance of like, I would say we now live in a world where like, well, what's your Facebook picture say? Like, what is, you know, for the young kids, like, what is their, you know, they wanted to go someplace because they wanted to take a cool picture of something. There's always going to be a component of that, but that's not the focus. The focus is going and having those like conversations with people like who are local and making sure you're learning about things that maybe aren't on the cover of the history book, the things that are on page 75. So I think you can rest assured knowing that it's not going to be like a a glaze over tour. We want you getting in there and we want you to have, you know, coming back feeling more educated than when you showed up. One, then two, Lori, and then Ann.
So I've been on a lot of the EF tours. Tell me a little bit about what makes a difference if I were to do an OLLI-based tour. You'd mentioned that there was some meetings with groups in between times. Is there an opportunity to have some maybe historical or cultural education about the destination beforehand as well to help people enjoy the tour a little bit more? What other things that you offer?
So good question. It was about basically what differentiates joining a normal go-ahead tour versus doing an OLLI tour. And I would say the base answer to that is traditionally when OLLIs are launching tours, they are not, it's not part of a consolidated method, which means it's only going to be for members. So part of it is member engagement. Part of it is allowing members who maybe know each other more loosely to become much closer because they've traveled together and like have that experience. In terms of what you're describing about additional education, that is not something necessarily where Go Ahead steps in. A lot of times the OLLIs I work with, I mentioned before the example of having tours that are specifically paired with curriculum because it's basically the idea we're going to spend a semester learning about something or someplace, and then we're going to offer, give the ability to join a trip to go there and kind of, bring the education to life. But of course, not every tour is going to have a curriculum assigned to it. And that's more where you might have folks internally offering like, it can be a variety of things. Like I've got folks who do Italy tours and they have pasta making nights. They bring members together, like certain members host people at their houses, or like if there's ability to do things on campus, they bring people to do that. Because again, it all comes back to engagement and friendship. But at the end of the day, Go Ahead isn't going to be like, I wish I would love to come up and facilitate something like that. But that's usually more of something that is done in-house. But I definitely, there's no bad answer to that. I think as much engagement as you can do with membership, especially the folks who who are going to be traveling. Because the other thing too is until the tour sells out, you might launch a tour. I mean, those Saginaw examples are great, and that's a testament to how awesome their director is. But at the end of the day, most tours launch and you get about 10, 12 people on after the first week. We run some promotions to make sure people have some incentives. If you're a repeat member and you've traveled with EF before, you're automatically going to get $100 off because even if you were traveling with a student product, things like that. But then, we might have a second meeting to get people additional spots filled. So there's a lot of opportunity from the time you launch a tour to the time you actually have your full group finalized. And all of it is good time to get engagement going. I think, and we had you, and then we'll go boom, boom.
So, tell me what the recommendation is on tipping, like for local guides.
Great question. The question was, what's the recommendation on tipping? And the great thing to know, I mentioned before, one of the things I will be doing is hosting what are called Bon Voyage meetings. So like I just did one last week for a school in South Dakota where group members come together and we basically go over the checklist of like things to not forget. They leave in 4 days. But point being is one of the things it will be told to you is like all the outlines for like what the recommendation is for tipping. So traditionally right now, tipping tour directors is between $8 and $11 a day. Tipping bus drivers is $3 a day. And for, I mentioned before, those local guides, they're not with you every day. They're just going to be in individual one-off situations. But same thing, the recommendation with that is $3 a day or $3 for them for that day that they provided service. And oh, don't worry, we're all good. We're all bouncing around.
That you're going to offer us?
None yet. That's part of what the goal of this meeting is getting engagement from folks and getting people's opinions. Because at the end of the day, the best OLLIs I work with are the ones that clearly do the work ahead of time to engage with membership. Because at the end of the day, if I said, who wants to go to Thailand and nobody raises their hand, and then we roll a Thailand trip out, we have a pretty good idea of how it's going to go. So point being is after this meeting, we will be doing some polling to make sure we have people's voices represented. Yes.
I do have to leave for a class
Sure.
next door, so thank you.
Of course.
And that was part of my question, what the outline would be for next year's excursions. My husband is staying.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank
Teamwork makes the dream work. Yes.
So, right now, the world is experiencing some, it's dangerous out there.
Yeah.
So have you made accommodations or have you changed the way you look at your tours in terms of security and, checking in, all that kind of stuff that,
Well, I would say this, and it definitely did not feel like it at the time, but I have been an employee of Go Ahead all through the last 5 years. So we all know when the world kind of took a pause there. But even beyond that, I think this is an advantage of being a company that's been in business for 55 plus years. So thinking about all of the different world events that have happened over that time. And it's one of the ones where I would say this, after seeing literally the entire world shut down, we have entire teams dedicated to monitoring security. So the places we're going, of course, like we had, and again, bigger picture than travel, my goal, my hope is that that area of the world like has more peace than what it currently has. But we have multiple tours that go to Israel. Clearly, we're not traveling to Israel right now, or other areas like in the Middle East that are potentially overlapped with conflict. So I would say this: if any place you ever go on tour with us, experiencing something where we feel it is not safe to travel, you will not travel there. We will not bring customers to places that are deemed unsafe. And then in terms of what options are, every example is different. I mean, I was in Iceland in October, but it's one of the ones where clearly we all probably saw to some degree on the news, like the volcano that was going on just out. The crazy thing about that is Iceland had a volcanic eruption 15 years ago that like shut down transport between London and New York. But that was not what happened here. So of course we were monitoring that. But the interesting thing with that volcano is that we never stopped traveling because it never affected the ability to get people there. We gave people options if they didn't feel safe. It goes back to the question about insurance. But at the end of the day, safety is an even bigger priority than experience, and experience is a very priority.
About the trip, so every year, do you like offer 4 different trips and then have everybody vote on it? So you're only offering one a year that would actually be going, or could you sign up for, more than one option?
No, good question. So the question was, how does it work in terms of actually picking the trip? Because I think you're referencing, I had the school that had the 4 trips that went. So that is what programs work their way up to being able to offer multiple trips. I anticipate for a first endeavor into it that we're going to offer 1. So I think nothing's been decided yet is the answer, but traditionally the way it would work is we would do the polling, we would try to find consensus in a place that people are excited about going, and then come back to offer a trip like that. If that trip is successful, thinking about like a year 2 or a year 3, you are then seeing, hey, we have a lot of engagement. Like a lot of our trips do end up having wait lists, because of course, if you get to that certain number of people and it sells out, like we don't, for the experience situation, like we don't oversell our trips. It's a hard cap. So it really, like I said, it's one of the ones it's going to depend on what internally the team wants to do. Question was, when do we actually travel? And no, the answer is we travel all year round. And traditionally, actually, what we've found is, because the other thing about summer is peak travel. Doesn't mean we won't offer it, but the majority of the ollies I work with actually don't travel in the summer because, one, we're thinking about costs. So if you travel in the middle of summer and go to Europe, it's going to be very warm and it's going to be the most expensive time of the year to go there. So what we strategically do is look at calendars. At the end of the day, we know, like, your question is like, well, what trip are we going to roll out? I wish I had the magic wand and be like, this is the trip that everybody's going to go on. Everybody's going to love it. It's going to fit everyone's schedule. That is not possible. Another reason for having multiple trips a year is that we space them out. So someone who can travel in winter, who can't go in summer, who can only go in summer. But no, we traditionally, we'll offer the trip that fits the schedule of the members to the best of our ability. But we definitely we're not locked into one specific season. So.
Curious how you position your adventure versus something like Rhodes Scholars or the Smithsonian, and some of the others that are out there?
Sure. I mean, there's definitely a lot of overlap. I mean, I have more experience. I actually just was working with a group down in Florida that was looking to go to Morocco and had decided to go with Smithsonian and pivoted back to us. Smithsonian specifically, that I would call I mean, it's a price point difference realistically. I mean, those are trips that are traditionally probably in excess of easily $7, $8, $9, $10,000 more. I mean, more, where ours are still going to be that elevated product, 4-star hotels. Again, like nothing about our product is budget, but I would say it's not again, I view those as very much like as a different price point type of experience. So I think that's realistic. And again, people are traveling, like travel with who you feel is the best fit. I don't ever come in here and say, oh, they're no good. No, they're probably great. If you're going someplace cool, like that's amazing. But in terms of direct differences, still group travel, still gonna, sometimes what they will have, at least with the Morocco experience, it was, they prioritized only having hotels that were like almost like converted. They were buildings that were something else before, where I think when we go to Morocco, our hotels are more of like name brand like places. And sometimes that's a selling point to folks, but little things like that. I don't have a ton of experience with Rhodes Scholar, so I just won't speak to it because I don't know. Yeah. Have you traveled with either before? Okay.
I kind of compare it to cruises where, you know, you've got, Oceania cruises up here.
Yep.
You've got Carnival down.
Yeah.
And they're all great products, but you just target different people, budgets and everything else. So I'm just trying to understand. Yeah, it's just so much speed up here.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, you know.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. Yes.
Anybody.
Okay.
And here, it would be the people that you're,
Well,
that are associated.
appreciate that context. So if for the folks watching at home, she was just saying that sounds like Rhodes Scholar only offers consolidated tours, meaning if you were to join any of their products, and I'm not, I said I can double check this, but it sounds like, so if you were joining, it would just be a group, or you would be guaranteed to have some folks you don't know on the tour, where of course, one of the things that Go Ahead is able to do, and I think specifically for the OLLI community that they really enjoy, is we are able to offer those tours privately, which means, again, it is just you traveling with your community, which is what some folks want to do. Do I have a hand in the back? Yep. The question was kind of the focus of the tours. Is it more cultural versus activities like bird watching? It's definitely going to be more cultural. If we don't really have a specific portfolio that focuses on those like hyper nature specific tours, there's definitely components of where you're going. You know, if you go to Latin America, you know, there's going to be a focus on, of course, like, you know, we're going to make sure we see some sloths and like we're going to do those things. But in terms of it being a specific tour about nature, that would be more, it's not that it's impossible, but that would definitely be one of those examples where it would have to be more customized versus like what our standard tours are. So hand here and then here. Yep.
You have to be a certain age, yes, for Rhodes Scholar, but you well, the last one I went on was to New York, Broadway, and it was people from all over the United States, and, you know, and so you're more reluctant to share.
True. Yeah. And that's another good point to make for our tours. Even if you were to do a consolidated tour, you're never going to be paired with somebody you don't know. There has to be a connection to you and your roommate. That is not a policy that we do not do random pairings. Mary.
I was gonna say that CSU OLLI partners with other OLLIs, like at Penn State, for example, we're in a class that they're.
I saw that on the website. Mm-hmm.
It strikes me that there would be some advantage to branching this out instead of just trying to come up with,
a tour for 14 people in CSU OLLI that all 14 people want to go on. If you branched out and tried to combine some of the OLLIs, you might be able to offer a wider choice. I don't know if it's anything that,
Well, we do. I mean, it's one of the ones where like, because like, it's not as if Go Ahead has like a direct partnership with like the parent OLLI organization. So, I mean, part of my job is doing outreach, and like I've talked to the director at Penn State before, and like I said, we had the longer process with Pitt. It's one of the ones where there's no rules against that, I guess is my point. That could definitely be things where like the executive directors are talking. So there's no, I guess I would say, historically, it has been more common than one specific OLLI will offer tours to its members. But at the end of the day, I mentioned before, technically everybody here was offered the ability to join the Japan tour through DU because of that connection. So I don't disagree with you that having, and I have no objection to potentially offering it to members at other universities. I'm just going off of like what kind of historical trends are.
if you were to poll the group of people, you probably all want to go different places, so.
Well, exactly. And I think that's one of the things where, I mentioned before, the lack of the magic wand, where it's the goal, I think a primary goal is the inner OLLI engagement with members, engaging with other members from the one. That's why most go in that direction. But at the end of the day, like I said, kind of mentioning the other companies, if people want to travel and they want to travel, I love that I'm able to offer an option. But of course, it doesn't mean that option is going to be good for everybody. Yes.
Would it be possible if Denver University was going on a tour, that I would be able to join their tour because they'd be going on a DIA?
Correct.
So that would be possible?
It would be possible. It technically was, I mean, Meredith, do you remember how those, like that engagement went out from?
They launched them and they filled up, so you're get there and when they open it up to our OLLI, I think it was in the summer or maybe September when you all still had some spots left.
Yep.
It was in our newsletter. We didn't really push it, but it was an exploration, so I did not hear if any of our folks signed up. I don't think anybody.
No, because there's only a couple, well, at this point, I mean, that trip leaves in 3 weeks or 2 weeks from today, actually. But it's one of the ones where bigger picture, and again, DU is going to be offering other trips as well. So, I mean, like I said, there's no perfect, I mean, the perfect solution for me is like every OLLI offers 1 or 2 trips. And then because of interconnectivity between the different groups, that members have the ability to kind of expand what they would want to, or like what they're offering. Like it would never make sense for us to do this trip right here, or it probably wouldn't make sense for us to do this trip right here, rather than do something else that's specific to membership.
The only way we'd be notified about vacancies would be through the newsletter, or would
You
there?
can check the website for DU, OLLI.
I mean, traditionally, the communication is done via newsletter. I mean, that's one of the ones where it's up to the way that the two schools work together. And I think with that one, kind of what Meredith was saying is that they, again, back to also thinking about even when schools collaborate, that there is DU, I believe their members got first access to the tour. And then it was like, if there are remaining spots, we opened it up, which is one, I think, a testament to show you the popularity of the tours with members. And then also just thinking, like I said, the collaboration is great, but it's also nice if we have our own tour. We haven't had one yet. The point is we're going to do polling after this, and we're going to figure out what the people want. And we're going to do our best to find a tour that fits for them.
Email from us, if you'd like to be on the committee, Lori's gonna help me talk through what our options might be. We'd love to have a rotation so that, a year from now, you know what's offered, but also 2-3 years from now, these other OLLIs usually have a rotation where they know what's coming around the corner. So if you don't see what you want in the first run, there's a possibility of later on being able to generate interest in the long term. So
yeah, I think it's kind of understanding. This is hopefully we look back at this meeting in a year or two, and like this was the entrance on the ground floor. It was engaging and then going from there, because SVSU, they had a pamphlet that went into that everyone got for, even though they were there to learn about 2025 tours, they had already previewed, they know where they're going in 2026. So we're not there yet because we're just starting, but at the end of the day, that is the goal to get to. Yes.
yes, of course. You'll get an email from me by the end of the week, so we'll have a little survey of locations, how involved you want to be, how committed are you? So that we know going forward what that might look like.
Yeah, I would say, just so folks know, like, this is great. Like I said, I was able to drive up and do this. Traditionally, this type of engagement session doesn't really happen. It's usually just polling through like a newsletter. So this is a little bit of like, I wanted to make sure I heard people's voice, but this is not the standard, I guess is what I'm saying. So I'm happy we're able to do it. And I really appreciate everybody coming and joining. Thank you. Oh, no, I appreciate you coming out.
Like, it's great. Questions?
Yeah. And then
Thanks for coming.
you get.
There's still donuts left anywhere else.
That's the only way.
You can, I'll take care of it.
Okay, I just didn't know. Sometimes it's finicky. I didn't want to accidentally goof with the recording at all.